Welcome back my DIY nomads. I hope you're doing really well today. In today's video I wanted to cover the most common questions that I get asked as a camper van converter. They come up so regularly, and I think this is just a case of people that love the idea of either living or spending time in a camper van, but haven't got that immediate baseline knowledge that people develop and grow over time. And I thought it would be really good just to be able to cut to the chase so people had this on hand, so when these situations arise they can tackle them straight away. Now, this question is probably my most common question that I'm asked, and it really just comes to the fact that the whole battery voltage thing is a little bit confusing. I guess a lot of people think that when you've got a 12-volt battery system in your van, that 12 volts means full, 0 volts means empty. But this is unfortunately not the case. Depending on the battery, whether it's lithium, AGM, lead acid sort of thing, carbon, lead, or whatever it is, there's so many different on the market. Your charge voltage could be anywhere in the realms of nearly about 12.8 to 13.6 volts, and that will be 100% charged. This also changes with the lifetime of the battery, and that voltage does start to drop down. Now, the empty voltage on your battery, on a 12-volt battery, is more likely around the realms of 11.5, maybe even around 12 volts. All batteries have different specifications and manuals, so please refer to those as well. And anything below 11.5, and you're just potentially going to be damaging your battery, and it's just costing you money at the end of the day. So just be really careful around this point and just try and keep it up above these values. Now, you will notice that if you put a load on the battery, like you turn some lights on or you use anything electrical, the voltage will drop. So let's say you had some LED lights on, you turn them on, and suddenly your voltage drops from 12.7 to probably 12.6, 12.5, depending on how much you've got going on. Now, if you immediately turn them back off, you'll notice that slowly that voltage will creep back up, and that's just because when those loads are taken, the voltage in the battery sort of drops. Now, it's actually really tricky to get a battery percentage reading just using the voltage. The most effective method is to use a shunt, and this is a device that goes between the negative terminal of your battery and all of the negative terminals of all of your appliance and everything else. It just goes in between and it registers everything going in and out. It does a lot of very cool calculating based on a few different factors, and gives you a much more accurate reading of your battery percentage. But some of them do require a little bit of breaking in, so you might need to install it, use it. You might even need to fully deplete the battery as much as you can, then fully charge it. Then and more cycles you do, the more accurate it gets. All these shunts should come with sort of like a readout, a screen, something to tell you what the percentage is. For instance, with Victron, they're very nice ones, and you can get them with like a little display, and you can control a lot of stuff in that. But they also sometimes have Bluetooth built in, so you can use the app, the Victron Connect app, and you can look at the status of your battery if you're within range of the Bluetooth. But a really good practice to do is to just fully charge up your battery, whether you've got a hookup or a trickle charge or anything, even just driving around for a long time, but making sure that your battery is fully charged about every 2 weeks, just to make sure that your shunt is staying as calibrated as possible and not getting slowly taken out of sync. One thing to really be careful of is solar panels, because these actually tend to exacerbate the whole shunts going out of sync even more, just due to a few factors. You can sort of calculate for them with some shunts, but you just need to be careful of solar panels and make sure that every 2 weeks or so you just really charge up those batteries, and then this sort of keeps it sort of more in tune. Solar questions are also quite a big one as well, and this one is obviously the most prominent one, and it's a very complex sort of question and sort of answer. But if I try to break it down in its simplest form, it depends. Solar panels are very temperamental. It depends on shading, it depends on the season, sort of the conditions outside. For instance, let's take the UK where I live. In the winter, I have like 600 watts on the roof of my van, and although it's not angled directly at the sun, so I won't be achieving that full 600 watts sort of input. In the winter, my panels are generating very, very, very little, almost negligible amounts of solar on most days, especially if it's overcast. So if you get stuff like any shading, even from clouds and stuff like that, your panels are going to be so much less efficient and generating so little power. So especially during the winter months, you're going to want to lean heavier on other sources of charging. Hook up trickle chargers if you don't have anything else wired up, like hook up your engine, generators, but generators are usually run through the hookup sort of thing. But you're going to have to rely heavily on other sort of more reliable methods during these sort of times. Something like a 100 watt panel might be good just for sort of keeping you just topped up here and there for like a weekend van, or something that you're not using very intensely at all. If you're starting to get onto stuff like you're spending any more than a couple days in the van a week, and moving on towards living into it, the absolute minimum I'd be looking at is about 300 watts. And if you really can, try to push for as much as you possibly can if you want to be sort of like more off grid, I'd say. But there's the negative side of solar panels, is that this then means you have less and less space on your roof if you want to use that for other things, like carrying stuff up there, like maybe a kayak or sports gear, or you want to have like a deck up there, sit up there, use it for anything other than that. The majority of my, I'd say a good half, maybe a bit more of my roof space is just solar panel coverage. So really, solar panels are only going to be your friend for sort of spring, summer, autumn. Summer, so great, such a good way to just keep your van topped over. Spring and autumn, there's on and off days, but generally it starts to really ramp up and it's, pretty good production. And if you can bracket them, like put them on angle brackets or whatever, so you can raise them up to face them directly towards the sun, then you're really going to maximize that and get the most out of every season, even the winter ones. Another electrical question. They mainly do seem to be electrical because it's probably the one thing that I think us as people struggle to adjust to when you move from more like a building house environment to a camper van. The demands on electricity that we have where we live in a house are huge. So when you drop down to a camper van, you really need to adjust your lifestyle. Otherwise, you're going to have to really look into having a lot more hookup time, much bigger battery banks, and quite large, costly electric systems. But in reality, this is one of the much, much harder questions to answer. Everyone's different. Everyone is different. Everyone's going to use different stuff in their van. Everyone's going to use different amounts of electricity. You can have different things, appliances and everything like that in your van. So it's almost impossible to answer how long is a piece of string. I'll go off of what I'm like and my system and what I've seen. But the majority of the usage is charging phones, using my laptop, like watching stuff like that. The electricity used on the lighting, just the small amounts of electricity used to keep my the electronics running on the heater, like my hot water and hot air heater, and like a few other small low level stuff. So really the most power hungry thing I do is like the cooking with maybe the induction hob, and it's for a short time. So I'm actually not a very power hungry person when we're out in the camper van. I've gone for like 600 watts of solar with 220 amp hour battery. I think probably if everything, all the stars aligned, I'd love to push that to 300 amp hours, because that would just allow me to be more able to be more off grid for longer periods of times through all parts of the year. I actually don't charge my batteries off of my engine, so I don't have any alternator input, and I am going to change that just so that I have that. It's just nicer to have that and not need it than to need it and not have it. But I think the biggest rule is to prioritize ways of getting power into your battery bank rather than going bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger with your battery bank. It's nice to have a good sized battery bank, but if you've got really effective ways of getting a lot of power safely into your battery at a good fast rate through multiple sources, then that's going to be way better for you than having a 500-600 amp hour massive behemoth battery bank, but you've got like a 100-watt solar panel on the roof. How much to convert a camper van? Oh, it's almost an impossible question to answer, but I've literally bought and converted a van for very hyper like basic level camper vanning for like literally £1,000, including the cost of the vehicle. But then we've done camper vans for people that have cost, the conversions have cost anywhere from, you know, £30,000 to £35,000. But that is like, you know, you've got to remember that we're paying multiple people to do work over multiple times. So really, you know, for a very, very nice high-end conversion, you could probably get away with spending, yeah, again, 13 to upwards of £20,000 on a conversion, and that would get you a really, really nice conversion, like really, really top-end sort of like appliances as well. But maybe instead you just get some less intense, less expensive equipment that just requires a bit more input from you as a person, so it's less like autonomous, should I say. And, you know, you could really quickly start dropping that down if you start to choose stuff like normal plies for instead of like birch ply, like less high-end materials. You could really quickly drop that down to like £5,000, and at the very bottom end of the scale, and yes, 100% of the sort of like the lower budgets, you can definitely convert a van for, you know, £500, you know, to a couple £1,000, and still have a pretty nice cozy setup at the end of it. You just have to be way more proactive at that end, at getting used stuff, finding stuff on like eBay, secondhand, Facebook Marketplace, loads of places like that, and just be really, really resourceful. Another question I'm asked a lot is, I don't want to waste internal space, so can I mount my freshwater tank externally? And of course you can. There's tons of kits out there that will sort of give you everything you need, from the whole, like the freshwater tank, the wastewater tank, and the brackets to sort of mount it to your model of van. My piece on the matter is, I never ever mount my freshwater tanks externally. The main reason being freezing. To stop freezing, I just mount my tank on the inside and sacrifice space. I know that you can't, depending on the size of your water tank, you can sacrifice quite a bit of space, but if I have the tank mounted externally, I have to make sure that that tank is insulated, and very likely also has a sort of tank water heater, like a very sort of low level heater. We're not sort of talking heat the water up to tens and tens of degrees, just keep it above freezing. But even those little tank pad heaters still take a lot of amps, and they really, really hammer away. And you're talking about hammering away through your battery bank in the season where you've got the least electrical input. So like your solar's really suffering unless you're driving. You're not really generating much input unless you are hooked up to the grid. So in my eyes, it's sort of like a really, really slippery slope. Yeah, you're talking about using lots more power during a very power hungry time in your camper van during the winter. So I personally never mount a tank outside. I just take that hit, because in reality, if you put like a roof box on the top, or you mount some external cases like on the rear doors or something like that, I'm more than happy for random like mechanical bits that I'm taking with me in case I get stuck on the side of the road to be mounted externally, because I don't care if they get cold. But water, if that freezes up and I've got no water, I have no water, but also if that freezes in a certain way, I might start cracking pipes, tanks, and other expensive things. So yeah, something that I personally just massively recommend against, and I'd love to hear everyone else's input on this. But for me, it's just too much hassle, really, too much hassle. Well everyone, that is my top 5, and I hope this video has been informative. Do you have any other questions? Would you like me to try and answer them in the comments below? Or do you have input into any of the questions that have been asked and you have your own opinion that you'd like to add or share? Firstly, leave in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And other than that, I'll catch you DIY nomads next time.